Capitalism in America has systemically impacted minorities historically and contemporarily, especially in areas like Harlem. This neighborhood has been molded by capitalist practices that have dictated its past and continue to play out in its present, ultimately perpetuating vulnerabilities and inferiority socially, culturally, and politically. Since the Great Migration, Harlem residents have faced systemic discriminatory practices such as redlining, unequal pay, revoked access to quality housing through housing discrimination, and the denial of their basic livelihood. These practices perpetuated the idea of a racial hierarchy that had precedent slavery by asserting unbreakable class and racial structures still present contemporarily. In the modern day, the outcome of these practices remains evident through the prevalence of things such as modern day colonialism, manifested as gentrification. American capitalism has strategically created discriminatory systems, erasure, and practices encouraging dominancy, ultimately leveraging blacks for profit while simultaneously oppressing them for the assertion of whiteness. Various accomplished writers have explored this idea of capitalism being inseparable from race. In Racial Capitalism, Jody Melamed explores the intersectionality of race and capitalism. By examining the systems embedded in it, Melamed argues that the inherent structure of capitalism involves the exploitation of other groups. And she goes as far as to say, all capitalism is racial capitalism. Melamed quotes, "Capital can only be capital when it is accumulating, and it can only accumulate by producing and moving through relations of severe inequality among human groups." Samuel Stein's The Capital City, the Real Estate plays a crucial role in exploring the inequities of New York's real estate market, particularly in neighborhoods like Harlem. Samuel Stein highlights the evolution of real estate over the years, from serving as solely a place to live to essentially a commodity. He mentions 37% of home sales were made to absentee investors. This trend shows the growing interest in gentrification and displacement of long-term residents. Stein also highlights the impacts on marginalized communities, arguing that rent burdens are becoming oppressive, particularly for people of color in segregated neighborhoods. In Harlem, these issues are perpetuated by historical practices such as redlining or modern day gentrification, which consistently push out the most vulnerable for the benefit of more wealthy investors. Cedric Robinson in Black Marxism showcases why this is. He argues that structural oppression is not an unintended consequence, but a necessity for capitalism's existence. Robinson claims the development, organization, and expansion of capitalist society pursued essentially racial directions. So too did social ideology. As a material force, then, it could be expected that racialism would inevitably permeate the social structures emergent from capitalism, showcasing why it is required to marginalize another group for necessities such as homes. Harlem Shadows by Claude McKay poetically demonstrates the conditions of the 20th century Black women faced of Harlem, who moved from the South during the Great Migration. These struggles underscore the intersectionality of race and class structures within Harlem, which entailed the removal of their innocence, creating unsafe and rugged lifestyles for these women. Alongside things like redlining and housing discrimination, these conditions set the stage for the issues discussed in Lex Pryor's analysis. In The Sin is Greed, The Making and Unmaking of Black American Mecca, Pryor highlights how these same structural systems persist today, however, in the form of gentrification. Pryor argues that the influence of capital and commercial interests have collectively warped the cultural makeup of Harlem and continues to do so. From personal accounts, Pryor discusses the presence of Starbucks and Whole Foods in replacement of cultural sites as the latest demonstrations of this makeover. As Black residents are pushed out of the community, so are cultural landmarks such as street names with significance to the civil rights movement being dismissed as solely the corner. Ultimately, long-term oppression and dehumanization continue to exist today in Harlem, but also across the entire United States. This is evident here. 70.4% of NBA players are Black, yet the majority of team owners are white. In hip hop, a genre built on Black creativity and hardship, 90% of the music is owned by Sony Music, Universal Music Group, and Warner Records, which are companies predominantly run by white people. One of the most incredible creatives of our time, Virgil Abloh, founded Off White, yet he owned less than 50% of the brand. Similarly, Rihanna's Fenty Beauty, promoted for being Black owned, was co owned with Bernard Arnault, the world's second richest man. In the NFL, where 58% of players are Black, only 7 of the 32 teams have Black owners. Kanye West's Yeezy brand generated billions for Adidas, yet when they ended the partnership, they revoked any of his contributions and continued to profit off of his designs. Or artists like Michael Jackson and Tina Turner had most of their music owned by white corporations. And again, Black tech entrepreneurs receive less than 1% of venture capital funding. These examples highlight the indistinction between racism and capitalism. In order for capitalism to operate, one group must be oppressed in the process. We must provide the support necessary to ensure that Black excellence translates to Black wealth. We must dismantle barriers and remove systemic oppressive systems to ensure that this excellence leads to Black equity and ownership, which is long overdue.